Welcome back, everyone. It's Mr. Brain, your friendly neighborhood gaming dad, here with another video. And ever since I started making content, especially my arena videos, I've gotten quite a few questions in Discord and in game about how to make your teams better. And while some of them come from a very informed space, some of them don't. I won't lie. I still get some very basic questions about how to handle arena. And I thought it would be best to give 5 beginner level tips on how you can make your team better or how you can work to make your team better so that you can have a stronger foundation for making yourself better in arena as a whole. Because we all want these sweet, sweet carbon steals, especially those ones you only get from being in a high rank. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Tip number 1, you need 2 tanks. You cannot get by in arena with 1 tank or less, because I have seen people run no tanks. If you don't have someone that is capable of absorbing damage, such as Rigoro, Thunder, or healing it off, such as Tom Martin, your damage dealers, no matter how powerful they are, will not be able to deal any damage for you. If you have a front line that crumbles, the back line will follow sooner than they're able to kill anyone. It's just that simple. Tip number 2, AoE is your friend. Can you get away with having mostly single target damage? Absolutely. You could have your 2 tanks, 2 single target damage dealers, and 1 AoE and be just fine. But if you leave this AoE out, you're not going to be dealing enough damage to enough people to get ahead in combat. And if you let your enemies get ahead of you, especially their backline, you're gonna have a hard time. Single target is great for breaking an infantry line, which you should be running into. But if you don't have AoE to start breaking down that back line sooner rather than later, they're going to have more troops than you know what to do with, even with your single target still doing decent damage. They're going to weaken you before you can get to them. So, at least one, and put in a spot where they can deal as much damage to as many people as possible. Tip number 3, your debuffs and your buffs are also your friend. Finding a way to incorporate as many buffs and debuffs into your team as possible will help you out in the long run, because you're eventually going to be up against people the same rank as you, the same power as you, maybe even stronger, and they're going to have better research. So you need to be able to make up that gap. So commanders like Thunder, who are capable of giving AoE debuffs to multiple squads. Tom, who is able to give a nice little AoE AoE debuff to damage. And of course, Alex giving his massive AoE buff to all troops around him, conveniently 5 squads in total. Jaden having a nice debuff on defense to increase damage for your allies. Lee, fan favorite. This debuff is absolutely huge. But stacking all of those debuffs in as early as you can in combat will give you an edge. And if you can get ahead in troops by weakening them, that gap starts to compound. If you get ahead in troops, you will stay ahead in troops. It's hard to make up that difference once you've made it for yourself. Tip number 4, and admittedly this is one I don't talk about much. Find a training buddy. If you notice, there are a couple of people who either hit me or I hit them on a regular basis. Naruto one has been one of my training buddies for a very long time. Same with Pina Colada. They are people that I can trust to stay consistent in their level of play and be either just ahead or just behind me, depending on whether or not I've finished a research. But what this allows me to do is test new formations and see in real time the differences that it makes. Like, this is my standard setup. I can see that this is doing fairly well. I believe I made a formation change on this one to see if movements would have changed up how many kills I got. And then I'll come to another one and see that this is a slightly different formation setup, but I got close to beating him this time. And I can see what differences work best for me. And I can use those to beat other people. You can do this too if you find someone who stays around your level of power and work with that person in order to make your team better by testing out new ways of combat. Because once you get up to a certain level, fighting just to fight is pointless. Make sure you have a reason to target somebody, and if you don't have anyone else to target your training buddy. And last but not least, do not skip the replays. I know it's very tempting to hit that skip button and go about your day with your win or your loss and not try and figure out how it happened. But without seeing the replay, for example, I don't know why this ended up happening the way that it did. I don't know why, with a 2 million power gap, I was able to beat him simply by having more troops left on the field. Being a frontline unit, how did Tom Martin survive? How did his Rigoro Charlie survive? What happens? But if I see the replay, I can see that he set his Rigoro and his Nakano Lewis down here by themselves against my solo Rigoro. They weren't going to take a lot of damage down here. But because he left his Lewis down here, they're not hurting anyone on this end of the map, which means I'm taking a lot less damage than I should. My Tom Martin survived solely because they only put a Dut up against it. There's no AoE damage to hurt them. There's nothing affecting him right here. He's healing off almost every bit of damage that's being dealt to him because of how they set up and how I set up. Without the replay, I wouldn't know that. So, something to keep in mind. And with that, that's 5 short tips that you can use to better your team or work to better your team in the future. Now, if you have any more informed questions, please reach out to me on Discord or in game. I'm available to help anyone assess their arena team and make it better, because I know those rewards really make a difference for the morale of the game. Because getting behind in stats and equipment and stuff like that can get demoralizing. If you can find a way to get just a little bit more out of your gameplay, it helps. So, ask me questions. Reach out on Discord. I'm more than happy to help anytime that I can, and I am likely, or if not guaranteed, to at least respond within 24 hours. And with that, that's my basics arena team and 5 tips on how to make yours better. This is Mr. Brain, your friendly neighborhood gaming dad, signing off.